The bloodline is dead. And if you think I'm being dramatic, you clearly didn't watch what happened when the Usos stepped into the ring thinking they could still dominate tag team wrestling like it's 2022. What we witnessed was nothing short of a public execution, a systematic dismantling of everything the Usos represented, delivered by two absolute monsters who made G and Jimmy look like they belonged in developmental. Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed didn't just beat the Usos, they humiliated them. They exposed every weakness, exploited every flaw, and left the former undisputed tag team champions looking like pretenders who'd been living off past glory for far too long. And the worst part? The Usos had it coming. For months, we've watched the Usos coast on their reputation while younger, hungrier teams have been tearing up the division. They've been playing politics backstage, riding Roman's coattails, and acting like they're untouchable legends when the truth is they've been soft, complacent, entitled. And last night, reality came crashing down like a freight train wearing Bronson Reed's face. Let me paint you the picture of exactly how brutal this beatdown was, because if you missed it, you missed one of the most career-defining moments in recent WWE history. From the opening bell, it was clear that the Usos were in for something they hadn't experienced in years, a fight they couldn't win through family connections or Roman Reigns' interference. Bron Breakker, that absolute specimen of destruction, came out looking like he was ready to end careers. The man's been on a rampage since his main roster debut, and everyone's been waiting for him to face real competition. Well, congratulations to everyone who thought the Usos would be that competition. You just watched them get schooled by someone who represents everything they used to be but never will be again. The match started with Jimmy trying to show off that vintage USO swagger, bouncing around the ring like he was still the cocky twin from 2020. Breakker let him have his moment, for exactly 30 seconds. Then he grabbed Jimmy mid-super kick attempt and launched him across the ring like he was throwing out garbage. The impact was so violent that the crowd went silent. You could literally hear Jimmy questioning his life choices. But here's where it gets interesting and infuriating if you're an Usos fan. Instead of adapting their strategy, instead of showing the ring IQ that supposedly made them legendary, what did they do? They tried the same exact moves. They went for their tired super kick party routine like they were facing some jobbers from 2015. Bronson Reed was having absolutely none of it. When G attempted his corner splash, that move that's been telegraphed for the past 5 years, Reed caught him mid-air and turned it into a power slam that shook the entire ring. The sound was sickening. G bounced off the mat like a basketball, and for a moment, you genuinely wondered if he was going to get back up. Now, I want you to tell me in the comments, when was the last time you saw the Usos look genuinely threatened in a match? When was the last time they faced adversity they couldn't overcome with a last-minute hot tag or interference? Because I'm drawing a complete blank, and that's exactly why this match was so satisfying to watch. The psychology of this match was absolutely perfect. Breakker and Reed weren't just beating the Usos physically, they were breaking them mentally. Every time Jimmy or G tried to build momentum, one of these monsters would shut it down with brutal efficiency. It was like watching veterans trying to teach young upstarts a lesson, except the roles were completely reversed. Breakker's spear to Jimmy at the 8-minute mark wasn't just a finishing move, it was a statement. The way he loaded up, the way he exploded across the ring, the way Jimmy folded in half on impact, it was poetry in motion. Violent, devastating poetry that left Jimmy clutching his ribs and questioning whether his body could take this kind of punishment anymore. And let's talk about Bronson Reed for a moment, because this man has been criminally underutilized until now. At 330 pounds, he moves like someone half his size, but hits like someone twice his weight. When he hit the tsunami splash on G, and I'm talking about that moment where G was already down, already broken, and Reed just launched himself off the top rope like a guided missile, the entire arena felt it. You want to know what really made this match special? The Usos couldn't rely on their usual tricks. No Roman Reigns music hitting at the perfect moment. No solo sicko running interference. No Paul Heyman causing distractions. Just pure, unadulterated wrestling, and they got exposed harder than a fraud at a magic show. Here's a question for the comments: do you think the Usos have been holding back younger tag teams for too long? Because after watching this match, I'm convinced they've been taking up space that could have been occupied by hungrier, more deserving competitors. The turning point, and trust me, there was a very specific moment where you could see the Usos realize they were in over their heads, came when they attempted their classic twin magic spot. You know, the one Jimmy gets beaten down, rolls out of the ring, G slides in fresh while the referee is distracted. It's worked for them hundreds of times over the past decade. Breakker was ready for it. Not only was he ready for it, he wanted them to try it. The moment G slid into the ring thinking he was getting a fresh start, Breakker grabbed him by the throat and hit a German suplex so crisp, so perfect, that it looked like something out of a textbook. G landed on his neck and shoulders, and the way his body went limp for just a moment, you could see the fight leaving him. That's when Reed tagged in, and what followed was 5 minutes of absolute domination. This wasn't wrestling anymore, this was a public service announcement about what happens when legends refuse to pass the torch and younger, stronger competitors have to take it by force. Reed's offense in this match was a masterclass in controlled aggression. Every move had purpose. Every strike was designed to wear down his opponents both physically and psychologically. When he hit that running crossbody on both Usos simultaneously, crushing them against the turnbuckle like they were made of paper, you could hear the air leave their lungs from the cheap seats. But here's what really made me angry as a longtime WWE fan: the Usos' complete lack of adaptation. These are supposed to be seasoned veterans, former multiple-time champions, wrestlers who've been in the business for over a decade. Yet they kept trying the same moves, the same sequences, the same strategies that clearly weren't working. It was like watching someone repeatedly touch a hot stove and act surprised when they get burned. Professional wrestling is about evolution, about adapting your style to face different challenges. The Usos showed up to a knife fight with pool noodles and seemed genuinely shocked when they got cut up. Tell me in the comments, am I being too harsh on the Usos, or have they really become that predictable? Because from where I'm sitting, this match exposed them as one-trick ponies who'd been coasting on reputation for far too long. The near falls in this match were absolutely brutal, and I mean that in the best possible way. When Jimmy somehow kicked out of Breaker's Gorilla Press Slam at 2.9, the crowd thought they might see a comeback. For exactly 15 seconds. Then Reed tagged back in and hit a backdrop driver that made Jimmy's previous punishment look like a massage. These weren't your typical wrestling nearfalls where the babyface miraculously survives to build drama. These were desperate survival instincts kicking in while two monsters systematically destroyed everything the Usos thought they knew about tag team wrestling. G's selling in this match deserves special mention because it told the entire story. Early on, he was his usual animated self, shouting encouragement to his brother, looking confident despite the early disadvantage. By the middle of the match, you could see doubt creeping in. His movements became more desperate, his expressions more concerned. By the end, he looked like a man who realized his time at the top was over. The final sequence was absolutely perfect in its brutality. Reed had Jimmy isolated in the corner, hitting those thunderous body shots that sounded like gunshots throughout the arena. Each impact doubled Jimmy over a little more, and you could see him trying to cover up, trying to protect himself, but there was nowhere to hide from 330 pounds of concentrated violence. Meanwhile, Breaker was stalking G on the outside, like a predator circling wounded prey. When G tried to make the save, tried to break up Reed's assault on his brother, Breaker was ready. He grabbed G mid-run and hit a belly-to-belly suplex on the outside that sent him crashing into the barricade with such force that security had to check if the barrier was still structurally sound. That left Jimmy alone with Reed, and what followed was the most one-sided beating I've seen in a WWE ring in months. Reed hit his Tsunami splash not once, not twice, but 3 times in succession. The first one knocked Jimmy unconscious. The second one was just punishment. The third one was sending a message to every other tag team in the division. When Breaker made the cover, Jimmy couldn't even lift his shoulders. It wasn't a wrestling finish, it was a mercy killing. The referee's 3 count felt more like a formality than the end of a competitive match. Here's another question for you: was this the most dominant tag team performance you've seen all year? Because I'm struggling to think of anything that comes close to this level of systematic destruction. But the match itself was only part of the story. The aftermath told us everything we needed to know about where these teams stand in WWE's hierarchy. Reed and Breaker didn't celebrate like they just won a hard-fought victory, they walked away like they'd completed a routine training exercise. No emotion, no exhaustion, just cold professionalism from 2 men who knew they'd just made a statement. The Usos, meanwhile, needed help getting to the back. Medical staff was checking on Jimmy, who looked like he'd been hit by a truck. G was moving under his own power, but just barely, holding his ribs and walking with the careful movements of someone who just learned what real punishment feels like. The crowd's reaction told the entire story. Early on, they were split between respect for the Usos' legacy and excitement for the new blood. By the end, they were on their feet for Breaker and Reed, not out of respect for a good match, but out of genuine awe at the level of dominance they just witnessed. This wasn't just a changing of the guard, it was a hostile takeover. Reed and Breaker didn't just beat the Usos, they made them irrelevant. They turned former champions into cautionary tales about what happens when you rest on your laurels in a business that never stops evolving. The most telling moment came during Reed's post-match interview. When asked about facing the Usos, he didn't even acknowledge them as former champions or legends. He called them roadblocks that needed to be moved. That's not trash talk, that's the cold, hard truth about where the Usos currently stand in the tag team division. Breaker was even more direct. He said the Usos represented everything that was wrong with modern tag team wrestling: too much talking, not enough fighting; too much politics, not enough performance; too much living in the past, not enough focus on the present. Every word was calculated to sting, and based on the Usos' expressions, every word hit its mark. Now, I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think this was a fair assessment of the Usos, or were Reed and Breaker being disrespectful to legends of the division? Because personally, I think they were being honest about something everyone's been afraid to say out loud. The implications of this match extend far beyond just 4 wrestlers. This was WWE's creative team sending a clear message about the direction of the tag team division. The era of part-time champions and politically connected teams is over. The future belongs to hungry, aggressive competitors who earn their spots through performance, not through family connections. Look at the numbers if you don't believe me. The Usos' last genuinely impressive tag team performance was over a year ago. Since then, they've been coasting, taking up valuable television time that could have been used to build new stars. Reed and Breakker represent everything WWE needs in their tag team division right now: youth, aggression, athleticism, and most importantly, the desire to prove they belong at the top. This match also exposed some uncomfortable truths about the Bloodline's current state. Without Roman Reigns' protection, without the faction's political power, the Usos are just another tag team, and not even a particularly impressive one by current standards. Their moveset feels dated, their psychology feels predictable, and their physical conditioning looks questionable compared to the new generation of competitors. Reed's conditioning alone made the Usos look like part-timers. Here's a man who weighs over 300 pounds, moving like a cruiserweight, maintaining his intensity for the entire match while Jimmy and G were visibly gassed by the 10-minute mark. That's not just genetics, that's dedication, preparation, and professional pride. The technical aspects of this match were equally telling. Breakker's German suplexes were picture-perfect, with textbook form and devastating impact. His transitions between moves were seamless, showing a level of ring awareness that typically takes years to develop. Compare that to the Usos' sloppy execution, mistimed sequences, and obvious communication during spots. Here's what I want you to think about: if this match happened 5 years ago, would the result have been different? I genuinely believe the Usos have regressed as performers while the overall quality of tag team wrestling has increased dramatically. The storytelling in this match was subtle but effective. Every near fall felt earned, every comeback attempt felt desperate rather than inevitable, and every big spot had consequences that carried through to the end. This is what happens when wrestlers trust their abilities rather than relying on booking shortcuts and interference finishes. Reed's Tsunami splash sequence was particularly well executed from a storytelling perspective. The first splash got the victory, but Reed wasn't satisfied with just winning, he wanted to make a statement. Each additional splash was about establishing dominance, about making sure the Usos understood exactly where they stood in the new hierarchy. Breakker's role as the enforcer was equally impressive. He didn't need to be the one getting the victory to make his impact felt. Every time he was in the ring, the match's intensity level increased exponentially. His presence alone changed the dynamic, turning what could have been a competitive match into a systematic destruction. The crowd's evolution throughout the match perfectly mirrored what was happening in the ring. They started out hoping for a competitive match between respected opponents. They ended up witnessing the birth of a new era in tag team wrestling, and their reactions reflected that shift in real time. By the final bell, even the most dedicated Usos fans in the audience were applauding Reed and Breakker. That's not fickleness, that's recognition of superior performance. When wrestlers earn respect through their work rather than their connections, audiences respond authentically. So here's my final question for the comments: after watching this match, do you see Reed and Breakker as the future of WWE's tag team division, or do you think the Usos still have something left to prove? Because from where I'm sitting, this match answered that question definitively. The Usos got destroyed, but more importantly, they got replaced. Reed and Breakker didn't just win a match, they inherited a legacy and immediately made it their own. The tag team division has new leaders, and they earned their positions through the most convincing argument possible: complete and total dominance over the former champions. This is what happens when the old guard refuses to evolve and the new generation refuses to wait their turn. The result isn't just a changing of the guard, it's a revolution, and the Usos just became its first casualties. The future of tag team wrestling looks bright, physical, and absolutely ruthless. Reed and Breakker have set a new standard for what championship-level tag team wrestling should look like, and every other team in the division is now on notice. The Usos? They're on life support, and after this performance, it's hard to imagine them recovering anytime soon.